podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Ed, how you doing?
I'm feeling plucky. Plucky and brave and battling against giants, David and Goliath. Those are all the words I like to use about Manchester United. Those are ingrained into our great history, you know, fighting against all the odds of those nasty big clubs around us.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone that follows you on Twitter will know already roughly where you stand on the matter of the Bayern Munich game, but we shall go into more detail about that in a bit. But before all that, it backfired our little plan to put a banner behind a plane, didn't it?
Well, you know, you did chip in the 800 quid, didn't you? What were your celebrity star turns on Full-Time Devils these days, you know? And yeah, you're a TV star, Paul. TV,
if you include YouTube in that. I just want to make it extremely clear, since Red Issue are after the people that did it, it was not us, right? Just, we had nothing to do with that, nor would we have anything to do with such a thing.
Since we're on that, I mean, Twitter is necessarily reductive, so it's hard to get your point across most of the time, at least in any kind of coherent manner, but I have to say I thought that was utterly stupid and childish, and I rather thought more of it was made than was necessary. Of course, it's a story, I suppose, but as far as I can tell, this was a few fans who tried to do that. Whether you believe the sentiment or not, that he was the wrong man and Moyes should go, I think towing banners behind planes is just a little bit small time, isn't it? Isn't it rather Scouse or City to do that kind of thing? It's a shame that we've been reduced to that kind of nonsense.
Yeah, I think it's a slightly complicated issue. Not really particularly complicated, but basically that banner is only partly about Moyes, and it's highly about Tufty and Stretford End flags. You know, it was a response to the fact that the chosen one banner, nobody would take it down, and also it was a frustrated response, I think, to the kind of media insistence that the crowd are all behind Moyes. Having said that, I think it was very misguided, not least of which because, unless it was a secret inside plot to generate sympathy for Moyes, it's backfired hugely, because what happened was the ground was more pro-Moyes than they've been for weeks. The support hadn't tipped far enough for that to be the tipping point to kind of, you know, galvanise the anti-Moyes feeling around the stadium. And actually, anti-towing plane banners is always going to be higher up your agenda than anti the manager, isn't it?
Well, because in the end, Moyes may be a but he's our so sorry for the language. I really ought to stop swearing. It's these crazy times. They've had an effect on me. But the point being, whether you like Moyes or not, fans are going to defend him against a perceived attack from the outside or the inside, as it happens. One thing about that was Moyes' reaction, because he got a lot of, I'd say, positive press for that, for, you know, barrel out, chest out, storming onto the pitch and into the dugout ahead of his team, which is a fair way of interpreting it. The other thing that kind of struck me was that clearly had an effect on him, though, because he changed his pattern. I don't recall Ferguson ever taking that kind of action before. The fact is, Moyes is insecure in his own mind to the extent that he would, rather than come out with his team, that is the norm, felt like he had to go out first and show, as he said, show that he's the manager and he's there. Seemed a little bit small time for me. I don't think he needed to do that. I think the real talking is on the pitch, and in fact his United won that game against Aston Villa, which is, I suppose, a topic we ought to talk about handsomely, and that's where Moyes should be getting praise when his team wins, not for making statements because some fans are against him.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. One last thing about that banner, the people that did it and then publicised it as a Red Issue action, that was a really silly thing to do, right? Does not seem smart at all to do that.
Did they publicise it as a Red Issue action, or was it happened to be on the Red Issue forum and the media of not looking into the nuances of this, calling that Red Issue and making it look like this was a magazine endorsed action?
Right, possibly.
I suspect it's the latter. Actually, I don't know, given necessities of space and nuance of story, I would suspect that's the case. So, look, I'm sure they miffed about it because they, I'm quite sure, do not want to be associated with something quite so embarrassing. I'd rather think the not so subtle threats, if that's the right word, of outing them, not necessarily either stand on the high horse about this one. You made it clear that this is not an officially endorsed action, and I think we all get that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the football then, 4-1, an odd combination of a fairly accurate result, because United had a lot of cutting edge late on in that game, but it definitely a fixture that could have gone a different way if Benteke was less wasteful of his chances when it was 2-1.
Well, yes, Benteke seems to score in bursts, normally around contract signing time. Although, to be fair, he's had a half-decent last few weeks, hasn't he? If he had taken chances, that would have been different. In the end, I think 4-1 did flatter United. This wasn't a 3-goal margin performance, but it was good enough. It was good enough, and I guess in the end, Aston Villa will feel a little unlucky that it looks quite so wide. The margin could have had penalty, of course, but there you go. It's so rare these days that United get a good performance at home and score a lot of goals at home. Remember, only 18 before the game against Villa in the league. That you'll take it, won't you?
Absolutely. It all started really worryingly with Villa scoring first. And actually, up to that point, United did look really flat. Someone that was at the game said to me that it looked almost like about 15 minutes into that game, United players just decided to take matters into their own hands. He stuck with the lineup pretty much from the West Ham game, a couple of tweaks to that lineup, and it was pretty effective once we did start to play, although very porous at the back, as we've said. But some nice interplay again from Kagawa and Mata, and I actually thought Kagawa probably the star of the show. A beautiful cross to Rooney for the first goal, and a sumptuous through ball. You did watch the Madrid Barcelona game the other week, the 4-3, when Messi played the through ball to Neymar, which won Barcelona the penalty. It was Messi-esque from Kagawa, the through ball to Mata, which won United a penalty. Right,
yes, or Iniesta-esque, if you take last night's game against Atleti. Iniesta to Neymar, an equally brilliant pass. Look, Kagawa had a very good game coming in off the left. Most definitely didn't play as a wide man. He and Mata effectively sharing the role at number 10 behind Wayne Rooney. It gave United a nice flexible field, didn't it, in attacking? I mean, if a little lopsided, because Ashley Young on the other side hugged the touchline, but one of the good things, probably the only good thing about having Alexander Butner in the side, is he does attack so much, and he effectively became the extra winger, with players dropping in to help out United defensively. At times, United switched to 3 at the back. I mean, it's that helps when United are flexible like that. And you know what? I don't think that's got anything to do with Moyes. I think it's the nature of the personnel, and the reason I don't think it's got anything to do with Moyes is because the pattern changes every week. I think it's got to the point, and I guess I'll make this later when we talk about the game against Bayern, that the players are taking things into their own hands in some respect. And I think you said earlier that after about 15 minutes, United players thought, hang on a minute. And I think that's right. Villa scoring early did give them a bit of a wake-up call. And after that, it was a lot easier. Not 4-1 easy, but a lot better after that.
Yeah, and then there was the period after the break when United came out, whatever the opposite of firing is, they came out watering. They were dreadful for 10 minutes. After the restart, Benteke had the chance with the header, and the one where Carrick was then sort of forced to play centre-back and lost Benteke altogether, and then Benteke fortunately swung and missed the ball altogether. But then Carrick managed to get back and make the block for the second chance. But that would have been 2-2, and I think a very different complexion on the game. The fourth goal, I thought, was particularly noteworthy. Just Januzaj back in some sort of form in his cameo in that game, I thought. And Chicharito, I mean, if he doesn't leave in the summer, I almost feel like it's more likely that Nemanja Vidic is going to revoke his new contract with Inter and stay than it is that Hernandez doesn't leave in the summer. His complete non-celebration of the goal was really unfortunate.
Well, yes, I mean, read into that what you will, I suppose. The thing is, when it comes down to it, football's often in the details, and this match was really about the details, wasn't it? And Aston Villa created more chances, and you could argue had better chances at that, and If it wasn't for the quality of finishing, then United wouldn't have won the game. But in the end, that did make the difference. And then 4-1 looks like a very good result because United finished some very good chances there.
Talking of the quality of finishing, Juan Mata opening his account for United. I'm very excited about it. Blogged all about it on Monday. Juan Mata's blog is like one of the highlights of my week nowadays. And this week it was extra big hugs for everyone in celebration of his goal, and he took it beautifully, I thought.
XOXO, yeah. Look, very, very, very nice from Mata. It's great that he started scoring. Remember, he scored 19 times for Chelsea last season. This is a guy who gets a lot of goals from midfield, and that is, after all, one of the things that United are really missing. And I think he will. If he plays more centrally, he's bound to get more goals because he's got a bit more freedom to get into the right areas. And when he plays wide, especially in some of his earlier performances from United where he really was hugging the touchline, then he's just not getting in the right positions. When United play in a more flexible way and he's allowed to drift inside, which has happened on occasion, especially when another player of a similar ilk is on the other side, then he does get into the right positions. And this time round, started the game at number 10, behind United's number 10. I think he'll score a lot of goals from that position if he plays that many times in that position. Still a conundrum. United haven't solved that one, really. Rooney, Van Persie, Kagawa, Mata, I would say really only 2 positions, 4 players for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And any discussion of this match would be remiss without mentioning the absolutely beautifully, poetically wonderful moment that occurred shortly before half-time when, after Kagawa's beautiful through ball, Juan Mata took the ball and none other than Bakuna committed a foul. Bakuna on Mata, it's a recipe for a penalty. Bakuna on Mata. It's what right-thinking people have wanted to see ever since those two players were both in the same league.
Right-thinking people, yeah, that's the kind of nonsense I get off people on Twitter, that one. Yeah, no, I yank your chain, yes. Very nice. Anyway, look, that's Villa. What else can we say about that one? Wayne Rooney scored twice. He's back into a decent run of goal scoring. He had a good start to the season, flat middle, I'd say, certainly in terms of performances, and maybe he's coming good now. Although it was interesting that he doesn't half look knackered when it comes to the end of games. He's puffing a bit, which suggests to me that his fitness isn't all there, or that he's approaching the point of burnout. Of course, he basically never gets rested, does he? Plays every single minute of every game, just about. Aside from a few injuries, and I wonder whether that'll drag into the last few games of the season.
Yeah, and I mean, it is also a consequence of his style, right? Because he's incredibly hard-working all the time. Even when he's not playing well, he's working hard. I would say this is the first period of the season where Rooney's actually been playing well. I think he was fine in the first part of the season. I don't think he was spectacular, and lots of people saying he's sort of carrying us and stuff, but I feel like this is the period of the season where he's actually making a really positive contribution, really making a difference.
I did see some stats on this. So look, modern fitness coaches tend to think that it's the amount and length of the sprints that you make that really is a good indicator of your real fitness, not how far you run. So in terms of distance run, he's not top of United's distance run tables, but he averages about the same as the rest. So this kind of narrative that says that he works harder than everyone else isn't quite right. And as he's aged, the number of sprints that he makes and the duration of those sprints has dropped. The same can be said of Robin Van Persie, of course, and that's really significant in Van Persie's case. So either that's a consequence of fitness, a lack of fitness, injuries, or the fact that, as we've said, his movement's dropped somewhat, and it's noticeable in terms of the amount of sprints he makes. So anyway, point being that I think that drop-off in that kind of explosive fitness is apparent in Rooney, and I think it makes a difference in terms of how he plays. Now, he puts a shift in defensively, he makes a few tackles, and that does make a difference to how he's perceived. I think in an attacking sense, the kind of feeling that he's going to deteriorate over the next few years is played out in some of the data. You'd have thought that United would have looked at that too, though. So, I wonder whether he needs a rest. Whether he'll get one or not is another matter. Yeah,
I mean, I don't think he will he? You could see there is a good, sensible argument to rest him against Newcastle ahead of the Munich game, and I certainly don't think he'll play 90 minutes, but I don't think he's likely to get dropped too often. It all depends whether he wants to be dropped, doesn't it? Isn't that the perceived wisdom about the subject?
Well, quite, yes. So players don't know the best thing here, and given that Wayne Rooney is player manager, it's hard to get the appropriate response out of him. Anyway, look, good debate about Newcastle. I guess, I would think that Moyes now gets to prioritise Europe, and the Newcastle game can be deprioritised, especially after such an intense game against Munich. I guess we'll get onto that one in a bit, but it's an interesting debate, really, with Europe out of the equation for next season, probably. Is he prepared to let the league form go?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he has to, doesn't he? Because there's nothing to play for. Although, we could still be overturned by Southampton for 7th place.
Well, he's playing for his job.
Yeah, that's true.
And credibility, and as we said last week, he's a man with some fear.
Oh yeah, and I thought that all that stuff around his chest barreling, I mean, it is classic covering activity, right? It's classic. I am trying to. If you play poker, then the most beginner poker players try and look confident when they're not confident, and try and look unconfident when they are. And what Moyes was doing there was very clearly trying to appear confident when he's not. The fact that he keeps using the word try in his press conferences is really significant from a neurolinguistic point of view, because that is what he's doing. He is really, really trying to represent himself as United manager, but he definitely does not believe that he's up to the job. And I think he's hopeful that he'll grow into it, and I'm sure in his kind of more optimistic moments he backs himself to grow into it. But his experience has been so horrific. If half of the rumours about what's going on behind the scenes with the players are true, he's not being taken seriously by them, so it's very difficult for him to take himself seriously.
Well, let me tell you, they don't take him seriously, do they? I think this is quite obvious, COD psychology aside. The fact that that dressing room is leaking all over the place tells you something. They have very little respect for him. Whether that reflects itself on the pitch in the coming games, we'll see. It certainly has done in the season past. But moving on to Bayern Munich, one of the things that was interesting is that whatever you say about the tactics and the result and the approach, it was clear that the players put in more of a shift. More pride of performance than has been the case for quite some time. And as Daniel Harris on Twitter reminded me of that famous Fergie quote, they were cheating the manager to have not done that beforehand. Now, whether that's a consequence of not believing in the manager, not believing in themselves, or being extremely complacent, or a combination of all of those, they certainly did that. So the expression of pride, and whatever that means, I know it's an awful cliche, it was quite evident against Munich, and made a real difference too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a reason it's a cliche, right? It's because there's a profound truth in it that pride in performance leads to better performances. And I think the turning point of the season was the Liverpool game and the fans' response at the end of the Liverpool game, which ironically had nothing to do with the players, nothing to do with the manager, and was all about the fans' connection to the club. The club as a sort of concept, not the club what it actually is and what it actually does. I don't mean, the Glazer-owned club. I mean the concept of it. But I think that's changed the dynamic, and the players are taking it all a bit more seriously since that happened. Even in the City game, they were poor in the City game, and it was a bad performance, but it was not a lacklustre performance in the same way that the Liverpool game was, and many of them have been this season. And the players, they worked their socks off against Munich. Now, Ed, I mentioned this earlier in the show. Anyone that follows you on Twitter knows that it is fair to say that you have not enjoyed either the performance against Munich nor the ensuing reaction of sort of, I don't know, pride and joy, let's say, at this particular 1-1 draw. Is that fair to say?
Well, I didn't enjoy the approach, and I didn't enjoy what it said about where United have got to, and I guess I didn't enjoy the metaphorical dancing in the streets about a 1-1 home draw. And I'm not stupid. I get the context. People feel the need to remind me of this all the time. It seems unnecessary. I'm quite smart enough to work out that in the context of not playing very well and having several injuries and playing the European champions, that being cautious is not always a stupid approach. That said, United basically played with 9 men in the box at all times, and there was very little attempt to actually impose any kind of style on the game. I mean, there wasn't. They just gave the ball away all the time. Almost got to the point where that was deliberate, humping it forward. just to clear their lines and not pushing out. So 25% possession. Possession tells only one part of the story of a game, of course, and United did create some good chances, not least the one that your man Welbs fluffed, and arguably had a goal ruled out rather harshly. I think most referees would have probably given that one. So, multiple storylines here. United could have won it with the chances. That was the one that Moyes chose to tell. The other is that they effectively parked the bus. Moyes, a man scared of being defeated, looked to set out the game to not lose. And that's what he got in the end, and you give him credit for that, I suppose, because got a result. Not a result that will take United through, probably, but got a result. But it was very, very negative, very, very small time. And final word on this, because I realise I've rambled a bit. I was pretty critical of Chelsea when they did this, and Inter when they did this as well. And I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say that this is a good thing. I want to see United playing attacking, vibrant, attractive football. I know we can do that, maybe not under this manager. And when you play that kind of negative way at home, this is Manchester United we're talking about. That says something about the state your club's in.
Yeah, I think it's very. I think the dancing in the streets thing, as you say, you understand the context of it. This is about the fact that the last two big games at Old Trafford have been tepid 3-0 defeats to teams that didn't even really look like they had to try very hard. So to see a kind of battling, prideful performance like that. I don't get to go very often, and I got to go on Tuesday night, which is why my voice is a bit shot, because the atmosphere was absolutely unbelievable. It was so loud, it was painfully loud a couple of times. Just fantastic, and such a sort of impassioned support for the team. Interestingly enough, there was a bit of Moyes chanting, one rendition each for the two Moyes songs, but neither of them quite caught fire in the way that the pro United chants did. Understandably so. The game itself, you're unquestionably right, although I don't necessarily conflate the idea that against the best team in world football at the moment, we have to park the bus to kind of match them, necessarily equates to us then going on to sort of say, well, we're happy with fourth place or whatever. It's the expectations have been lowered, but I hope that that's a kind of temporary thing, and it's about setting it in the right context. And, most United fans thought we'd lose that game, I mean, I'm sure there are many who thought we'd pull it off or whatever, but I think it's safe to say a majority of people thought we'd lose, and we didn't, and there were some phenomenal moments in that game. Welbeck's goal, cruelly and completely unfairly and impossibly ruled out. No, I mean, I get it. And then that really unfortunate miss of his. But he had an excellent game, and I kind of said he was my man of the match, and I was half joking, but not really. Having gone back and watched the game again, I think he was a perfectly good shout for man of the match. Vidic and Rio defended excellently, I thought, and I do think that tactically, on top of everything else, one of the reasons we had to play such negative bus parking football really was the available personnel, because if we hadn't done that, we'd have been in the Olympiacos situation where the midfield and the defence are separated by acres of space because of how deep the defence has to play.
Well, they played very deep, very, very deep last night. So the obvious choice was to switch Kagawa and Fellaini, and you'd had a better link between defence, midfield and attack, and probably lost nothing defensively because Fellaini offered absolutely nothing. Anyway, look. Here's two other things to not conflate. The idea that not approving of a style where United are parking the bus in the context of playing very negative percentage football for a season. That you shouldn't conflate that with an assumption that the only other option is to play Ozzy Ardiles style attacking football with 7 players, right? It's nonsense. It's total nonsense, right? So every single one of the people who've told me on Twitter that, yes, but United played like this against Barca in 2008, or what did you want, us to get 5-0 hammering? A, that's hypothetical, and B, it's classic rationalisation, right? This is to take a logical position which doesn't follow through to the outcome of your argument. And sorry, but it doesn't matter that United played negatively against Barcelona in 2008 because I tell you what, I can point to another dozen matches where United have played in attacking fashion against some bloody good sides over the years and won too, right? And again, you may say my logic doesn't follow through to the outcome, which is right. Yeah, it doesn't. So the point being that United had plenty of choices about how to play. Moyes had plenty of choices about how to play. The way he chose to play was in a very, very negative fashion with some pretty ugly football. He got a result out of it. If that's all that matters to you, then fine. If actually you want United to play some attractive football, and you think two things. One, that Moyes might have found his way, and this will bleed through into more negative performances from United, not less, and I suspect that might be the case. And two, a fear that United's expectations, or the fans' expectations, have been reset this season, and that we effectively are happy, we as a body of fans, are happy with some mediocre performances as long as there's a good one now and again, right? And I think that transition is happening, and it also means that the Glazer family will notice this and will see the fact that they don't really have to go spend £200 million to transform the squad, and they don't really have to go and get the best manager in the world. All they really need is good enough, and that may be what we've become. And so I guess those are the reasons why I am, pretty disappointed with the way United played. I get the context, and I get that United got a good result. And I see some deeper meaning in this, and it worries me.
Yeah, and it's also not that good a result.
No, well, yeah, practically speaking, United now have to go to the Allianz and win. So there's people who are arguing with me, saying, oh, well, now we can attack. Right, so we're going to park the bus at home and give away an away goal, which was, I have to say, pretty inevitable if you give Barcelona 75% possession. And then we're suddenly going to open out away from home. Right.
You just called them Barcelona, which is understandable because they do play a lot like them. But I have to say, one of the reasons that I thought it would be a huge mistake for Moyes to set up in a bus parky way before the game was that I didn't think it would work. I thought that Bayern would find a way through. And of course they eventually did. And I actually think they can be a bit disappointed with their own performance that they didn't do that sooner. You know, you said about the Villa game, it's in the details. It was partly down to details. Phil Jones, Vidic, Ferdinand and even Alexander Butner all made crucial interventions at crucial moments to stop Bayern from being able to score. De Gea made an excellent save. That's pretty standard. We kind of expect that. None of that was particularly out of the ordinary, and actually if Bayern had been a bit more toothful, had a bit more cutting edge in the first half, I think they would have done some damage. And I think deploying Müller as a false nine was probably a mistake. Sorry, I just used the word false nine unironically, which I don't I'm never proud when that happens, but that's really what they were doing. And actually I think if you'd had Mandzukic in there from the beginning, running around and causing bother, it would have made a bit more of a difference, I think.
Well, De Gea's dial was definitely working, wasn't it? As always. But the fact is that not for wasteful finishing from Munich, we could have been smashed in that game. Despite playing in a very negative way. 16 chances they created, 15 from open plays, and that was probably subpar for Munich. They had an off night, I'd say, and you could say that was partly about the way United played, and certainly the players afterwards, Arjen Robben moaning about United playing 9 at the back. He said that United played like a handball side, and for those who don't get the reference, I suppose it's like saying United played like a basketball side, transition between attack and defence being complete, right? So entirely about the defence, which is an observation, and I think also one that's true. So I get that in different circumstances. If Bayern had scored early and first, for example, it might have been very, very difficult for United because the pressure would have been on to open out those spaces. Now, I have to say, at half-time, I was pretty surprised that Bayern didn't actually work this one out. What they really needed to do was transition the ball from left to right much, much quicker. And although Toni Kroos was brilliant, he doesn't do that. He actually slows up play sometimes. So I'd have been tempted to jiggle things around a little bit if I was Guardiola, but he didn't, and United benefited from it. In the end, So I've moaned a lot about the overall approach, but I think some credit goes to some of the players for their performances. Carrick, I thought, was excellent. He's had a pretty poor season and been very poor in recent weeks, particularly poor. Vidic and Ferdinand rolled back the years, didn't they? They can defend their own box all day long. What they can't do is push up and help United attack because there's no pace on the turn. Jones put in a decent performance at right back. Butner wasn't embarrassing. I'm not sure he really deserves any praise, but he wasn't totally embarrassing. Certainly Robben didn't cause the damage that we expected him to do. And Wayne Rooney worked very hard up front. And, the one man who was trying to help with the transition from defence to attack was Danny Welbeck, and he did actually manage to stretch Bayern on occasions. Fellaini, well, less said about Fellaini the better. That was utterly abysmal, and I know people think I've got some kind of agenda against the guy. I haven't. I wish he was brilliant. I really wish he was brilliant, but I think I may have been wanting one aspect about Fellaini where I said we'd paid double his true price. I think actually just take the 2 off the front and then you might be getting closer.
That's maybe 10% harsher than I feel about him, or maybe 15% harsher. He definitely improved in the second half of that game, definitely. In the first half he looked absolutely overawed by the occasion. It was so obviously the biggest stage he'd ever played on, and it really looked like it was affecting him. He kept giving the ball away to the point at which there was a pretty massive, pretty ironic cheer when he completed a 5-yard pass about 2/3 of the way into the second half. It was very frustrating and difficult to watch, but I also did feel for him a bit because it was clearly partly the situation that got to him, and he definitely did improve in the second half. I mean, he's got passionate advocates, lots of people, especially the people that don't like Michael Carrick, generally speaking, saying, it's all very well having a pop at Fellaini, but Carrick's been rubbish for years, which I think is just nonsense. But Fellaini looks miles away from being top level quality every time I see him against top level opposition, and as you just said, Ed, people might mistake that for an agenda, but if I'm ever critical of a United player, if I ever critical of a signing or even the new manager, I'm always desperately hoping I'm wrong. We're fans, we do this podcast because we're United fans, and that doesn't mean you've got to say that all the players are brilliant all the time. It means you've got to say what you think and feel, but always if we're criticising the players, we're hoping they're going to come good, we're hoping it's going to turn around, we're hoping that Moyes will morph into Guardiola, It's talking of which, I did spend quite a lot of that game sort of squinting at a funny angle to try and make it look like Guardiola was standing in the home technical area. It was slightly painful seeing him standing in front of the United crest there.
Well, yeah. Look, we had a little thought piece on Twitter, didn't we, which said if you'd swap the managers in the summer, if Guardiola had become United manager and Moyes Bayern manager, right? Don't laugh. Don't laugh. Could happen. Then what would have happened? And I know it's a thought experiment, and I hate this kind of hypothetical nonsense generally, but it is interesting because I think we'd have had a very, very different season indeed. Maybe it would have gone wrong. Maybe the players wouldn't have responded. I somehow doubt it though, given that all that Guardiola has won, the respect would have been total. I suspect, players are like that. And would it have gone as well for Bayern? Would they now be tiki-tackering their way around Europe, having improved? It's quite unbelievable, but they have most definitely improved. They're a more complete side, Bayern, this season than they were last season when they won the treble. But, it's an interesting thought experiment, and we'd certainly be playing some nicer football. And I tell you what, if Bayern had come to Old Trafford and Guardiola had been manager, we wouldn't have parked the bus.
No, absolutely. One of the things that I thought about that game is, you mentioned Barcelona 2008. The one person who I think would have parked the bus in that game is Fergie. I think that Moyes has taken Ferguson's advice very seriously in European competitions. I have no basis for that except an instinct that is the thing that makes the most sense out of the fact, if you look at our tactics in Europe, it's been pretty much what would Fergie do, and I do think that he would have parked the bus. Do you feel differently about that?
No, you may well have done that. I actually remember when we talked about United away at Real Madrid last season, I moaned about United parking the bus then.
Yeah, right, there you go. Nothing if not consistent, Ed.
Well, look, I think I am consistent, and the other thing for those criticising me for this consistency is that it's also a personal feeling, right? I'm afraid people are conflating my belief that United should play in a more United-like way with some kind of argument around individual tactics and approach for one game, or that there may have been a hypothetically different result if United had played 7 up front. Anyway, look, maybe Ferguson would have done the same. Maybe. Certainly that Barcelona game, United had a pretty backs-to-the-wall approach, although had more possession and more shots and more passes in the final third than this game. I would argue that this is the most parked the bus has ever been for a United game in living memory, at less than 25% possession. I'd also say that there are plenty of times when the Ferguson side hasn't parked the bus against top-quality opposition, and including the 2009 and 2011 Champions League finals, when some people would have said that if United had parked the bus, they'd have had a better chance of winning. Instead, United tried to go toe-to-toe, the words David Moyes used about United's performance last night, and lost to Barcelona. So, at the risk of proving the opposite to my argument, it doesn't always work, sure, if you play good football, but there are not two polar extremes here. You can play in a better, more attractive manner than this, and in the end, this is what I'd like to see as a fan. And those people calling me a because I'd like to see United play attacking, attractive, good quality and entertaining football. Well, you all.
So I kind of agree with your list of players that played well. I don't think anyone played badly apart from Fellaini. Giggs wasn't really in the game. Maybe there was some injury being carried, or maybe it was a tactical switch to bring Kagawa on. And there's been an awful lot of behind-the-scenes talk about Ryan Giggs this week. Someone on the Talk of the Devils website saying that they've had a tip they clearly believe that Giggs is going to be forced out of the club in the summer. Something which I think most United fans should find to be a pretty disgraceful, self-serving approach to take to the Giggs situation if it comes to pass from old Davy Moisey.
Well, Giggs is quite smart on the PR front, and I think he will keep his mouth shut at the moment. And I don't expect Ryan Giggs will go around moaning that David Moyes is pushing him out. And if this story is true, I would expect the narrative to play out that Giggs is retiring, and he'll keep it fairly quiet until the day comes that he's able to put the knife in, and it wouldn't be just yet. So we'll see. There are many contexts in which Ryan Giggs might retire anyway, and I think the more serious one for me is not whether Giggs retires as a player or not. He has made a contribution in 1 or 2 games this season. I don't think it's really that significant. It's more a reflection on United's weakness in midfield that he has to make that contribution. I think the issue really is he not in the coaching setup because he has a fundamental disagreement with David Moyes about United's approach and style and way of playing, and that's the subtext to a number of these stories that's played out, and that's the bit that worries me more. Talk of rift went to the point where there was talk about people, Giggs and Moyes, having an open fight, and not fight as in argument, disagreement in the dressing room in front of people. I was told that was definitely not true by a couple of people, and so let's take that one as read. But if there is a subtext here that Moyes doesn't trust Giggs as a coach, and would like to strengthen his position if he feels in some way that Giggs is undermining him or able to undermine him because he's such a strong voice in the dressing room by forcing Giggs out, then that says a lot about David Moyes, the man, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't help feeling that Moyes' whole activity is all predicated on a kind of Machiavellian desire to keep the job. I mean, it's understandable, of course, but he does seem to be doing a lot of things which are very good for David Moyes and not particularly good for Manchester United, mostly keeping himself in the job. It's amazing, really, because on paper you could say it's been a good week for United, a 4-1 win, and results-wise at least, in some ways for my money, like performance-wise too, a perfectly respectable 1-1 draw with Bayern. But it doesn't feel to me like it's been a good week, and that could just be my own agenda. That could be because it's got to the point where I just don't enjoy. I just don't really like David Moyes. You know, I don't really like the way he talks about the club, about his job, about his role, about individual games, about individual performances, about individual players. He dragged Giggs out to do the... Look, listen, how agenda-laden is that, saying he dragged him out? I don't know if he dragged him out, but Ryan Giggs was rolled out to do the pre-Champions League coverage. And I know, Ed, you mentioned COD psychology earlier, but it's not just COD psychology. This is something that I do know about. Unlike football, Giggs's facial expressions did not match the words that he was using. There was a lot of forced, teeth baring, all the kind of classic NLP signs that somebody is not congruent between what they're saying and what they're feeling, and there was definitely a discomfort visible to me on that stage when the two of them were there. But yeah, I just can't wait for it to be over. Really, I'm just really looking forward to us having a new manager, and I think it'll be November next year. That's when I think it's going to happen, because I think.
Shall we open the book on this? Yeah, I think that's more likely than the summer, and you know, that would fit with the Glazers' view of the world. They'll give the guy a bit of a chance, and they believe that Ferguson's left the cupboard empty, as one tabloid put it this week, and you know, they're going to give Moyes substantial budget to go fill the cupboard again. So look, Moyes' future. You know, I said one thing that seemed to really wind people up. That I said I thought I'd, you know, given that I've clearly been on the fence about David Moyes' future on this podcast, and generally speaking, for reasons we've discussed over and over, that I actually thought United's performance last night moved me further towards being in the Moyes out camp, of which you're the flag-waving, banner-towing leader. The reason for that is because of this belief, you know, and maybe it's some nonsense philosophical belief that I like to be entertained by my team as well as just winning. And and I think both go together, by the way. You know, if David Moyes is going to drive us down the road of just negatively picking up results, and too much of the football this season has been percentage football aimed at just picking up a result. Very little of it's worked, of course. Then there's not a lot of point in him staying in the job at all, you know. And another thought experiment, given the reasons that we apparently rejected Mourinho, the PR gaffes that he makes, and the perceived negative football. Well, scratch those two out, because Moyes does both of those, and the other reasons that were discounted, you know, weren't taking these into consideration, was his magnificent CV and the guarantee of trophies. Apparently that's not important. Then, you know, there's not a good argument for keeping David Moyes, is there? But there you go.
The one that really gets me is the youth argument. Like, just go and talk to some Everton fans. Seriously, spend a bit of time digging around on Everton forums. Ask Everton fans what they think of David Moyes' youth development. It's an absolute myth that somehow, because Wayne Rooney... Rooney was the same. It's very similar to the Anazai situation. Rooney also fell out with Moyes for not playing him enough. Ross Barkley fell out with Moyes for not playing him enough. There's barely any proper youth development at Everton. That anyway, you know, there was some that was caused by Everton's lack of financial resources, but the idea that Moyes is somehow an heir to Matt Busby and Sir Alex Ferguson in terms of youth development, it's absolutely crazy, and that's one of the many reasons that people cited him ahead of Mourinho.
Well, yes, and total nonsense. In fact, if you look at his record, it looks very much like Barkley, who he actually kept in the reserves, and Wayne Rooney, who he did give a debut to, outliers. The exception that proved the norm, which is David Moyes is very much a reactive manager, and he'll tactically and strategically, and that he will react to a situation at hand. Players who are younger got their chance when he had very little choice. This wasn't a long-term strategy. Talking of tactics and strategy, of course, you know, Mourinho, the absolute master tactician on the small scale, and also a brilliant strategist. So, you know, but doesn't stick around for the long term, and makes all those awful PR gaffes and parks the bus, so we definitely wouldn't want him.
Yeah, quite. Right, so a couple of Twitter questions before we move on to the previews. Would you swap Danny Welbeck for all of Bayern Munich? Yes, I would, sorry. Don't tell anyone that. Would you swap any of Bayern Munich for Danny Welbeck? Yes, I would. Quite a few of them. Again, please don't tell anyone. At Workbench says, how bad is Marouane Fellaini? I think we've covered that a bit. And at Paul_D_MUFC says, at £27 million, does Fellaini have the most expensive chest in history? I have to say, for all Marouane Fellaini's faults as a footballer, I have never seen anything like his ability to control the ball with his chest. It's remarkable. He's actually not that good with his head, as far as I can tell. But that is, he's got a cultured chest.
Yeah, well, no, so did Mark Hughes and Dwight York. They're both excellent with the ball into the chest, weren't they? So Hughes in particular. So yeah, very, very good. Manages to bring almost anything under control. He's not very good with his head because A, he's massive and can't get off the ground, and B, he's got a big sponge on his head, so the ball comes off it at all sorts of weird angles.
Yeah, absolutely. So, at Ben Glorious says, an electrician reckons I'm getting no signal because I've wired up my TV incorrectly. Have you ever had your intelligence insulted? Yeah, like a lot, quite often by David Moyes, funnily enough. It's been a year of having our intelligence insulted and being told what we've seen is good and being told we should aspire to the level of a team we beat in the league by 11 points and to be told we went toe-to-toe with Barcelona when basically we just, I called them Barcelona too, with Bayern when we humped them the ball 75% of the time. Yeah, not. There's been a lot of that about. What about you, Ed?
Daily, by the hour and by the minute. But that's just Mrs. Rant. Let's not talk about Twitter.
Absolutely. Okay, so the Newcastle game, a really weird damp squib of a fixture. The other week, Southampton played Newcastle, didn't they? And that was a complete non-fixture. And we're sort of in a mini-league with Southampton and Newcastle, thanks to the might of Moyes' army.
Well, as I've said several times, 7th place doesn't win itself. Yeah, Newcastle, I suspect some changes. Obviously, Mata will come in. Really, you should rest Rooney and probably a few others, but we'll see. Squad's quite thin, isn't it? The thing is, Moyes' job is still on the line, right? So there is a scenario that plays out that next Wednesday night in the Allianz Arena, United take a serious battering, because it could happen, right? First goal goes in and it's Bayern that scores. United are going to have a really serious question, right? Park the bus and save yourselves humiliation, or open out. And as everyone on Twitter is telling me, take a good stuffing. Now, there's a nice thought question for you all out there. What would you do in that scenario? Anyway, so Newcastle is still important, right? Because it's important to get momentum going into the summer if you're David Moyes and if you're the players. There is really a scenario here in which United could win, say, 5 of the next 6 games. I mean, Everton away is really tough, especially coming after the Bayern game. But the rest of them aren't too bad. Hull, Southampton, Newcastle, Norwich, right? There's another one in there who I've forgotten. So, it's not a really seriously tough run-in normal circumstances. But right now, make a load of changes, lose this game against Newcastle, lose at Bayern, lose at Everton. It's starting to look pretty wobbly again, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And back when I predicted we'd win the league, one of the reasons I did that is because there are 2 key periods of our season where we had really easy fixtures. And one of them was the Christmas period, and one of them was the run-in. And I really feel, I know everyone else has got a much tougher run-in than us. It's just that ours has been rendered utterly meaningless. So it's all very well to have an easy running when there's absolutely nothing to play for. I mean...
Well, true. When I say easy, actually, there's in the mini league, we're playing a lot of teams around us, right?
It's incredible, isn't it? I guess the Newcastle game, then maybe he will play a stronger side. But I mean, surely you'd think that he's just going to prioritise Bayern because it's so clearly the only route to anything approximate. I mean, because if he wins the European Cup, his job is safe probably for another season and a half. Definitely another season, So I'm sure he's going to massively prioritise the European Cup, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Hernandez starting against Newcastle. I don't know, maybe I'll recall Wilfred Zaha from loan at Cardiff and stick him on the right.
Well, given that there's so few options available, yeah. I'm sorry to keep harping back to this, but let's combine it with a Bayern preview, shall we? Because, the two things go hand in hand. For United to win the European Cup, aside from parking the bus at Old Trafford, they're going to have to do it again at the Allianz and nick a goal and hope they win a 1-0, because I don't see us getting away with a high-scoring draw, do you? And then in the semi, in which United will most definitely have to play another side that's much better than us. The best case scenario probably being that Chelsea beat PSG or Borussia beat Real, probably both unlikely. So we'll have to park the bus twice there, and then in the final one we'll be playing a side much, much better than us. We'll have to park the bus there again. So, and we're looking at and those teams not taking their chances in the next 4 games in a row in order for United to win this competition. I think you can get odds on about 500 to 1 on this. It might be worth a punt if you believe in fairy tales.
Well, yeah, but they do happen in football. They really do, because you would have said the same about Greece in Euro 2000 and whatever. You'd have said the same about Chelsea winning the Champions League 2 seasons ago, and it is. Both those things do happen, and it's rubbish that we're in this. There's no question. It's rubbish. We're in a situation where that's our only route to success. It's pathetic. This is the fruit of Glazernomics ripening, right? Now you haven't got Fergie, but all that is also compounded by a terrible choice of successor. So yeah, it's very unfortunate, but it definitely could happen. It's just mathematically very unlikely, much as Chelsea's win. Gary Neville said it was written in the stars, and that's the only way it could have happened, because it surely wasn't written in terms of percentages. Everything had to fall perfectly into place.
But we're going to play an extra round of quality, right? So it's written in the stars of the stars, or whatever micro percentage, right? This is a mini galaxy billions of light years away that we're trying to reach here. So Chelsea beat Zenit, Benfica, both not very good sides that year. Barcelona had a real off night at Stamford Bridge, and there was a freak result. The 2-2 was a freak result, given 18% possession or whatever it was, and then Munich in the final on penalties, right? So United would have to beat not only Munich but then another side, likely one of PSG, Real or Barcelona, or Atleti, I suppose, and then another one of those in the final, right? So it's the quality in this quarterfinal is higher than in that year, and indeed I'd say in the year that Liverpool won with very similar tactics in 2005 as well. Greece, slightly different in that, there are some freaks at national level, and now and again. That was a freak of a freak, I suppose. So maybe United can park the bus away to the final and win it. Maybe. I have to say, I think it's a very, very long shot, and that's why you can get such good odds on it. Yeah,
I mean, it is a very long shot. I just want to say one final thing that I feel like it's just important for me personally to express, because the game against Bayern was one of the best hour and a halves I've ever had in my life, actually. So it's like, yeah, I don't sit exactly where you sit on the stylistic question, but I definitely sit closer to you than the people having a go at you for it, But regardless of anything else, it was absolutely extraordinary to be a part of that atmosphere, and it lasted, it spilled out after the game. As the Bayern players were walking off, I suddenly heard a round of applause, and I was like looking around going, what's going on? Who's being applauded? And I realised it was the Stretford end applauding the Bayern Munich players off the pitch. I don't know if that's common, but it was pretty amazing. And then of course, they started singing "Who Put the Ball in the Germans' Net" again, which was a popular refrain. And then as everyone was walking out and we're in the Munich tunnel, and that song started up, then there was a blast of 20 times, and that there was a real feeling of pride and which I actually don't think was about. I don't think it was just about the fact that the expectations have been lowered so far, that a 1-1 draw feels like a European Cup win. I think it's more complicated than that. I think it is genuinely partly about not being spoiled as fans, that we not that we should turn into Liverpool fans and live on past successes entirely, but that actually taking some pride in the things that we've seen has some real merit as things go rough. All that totally put into the context of there is an additional level of frustration because many of the things that are going wrong don't have to be going wrong, and I do think that should be addressed too. But I just wanted to get that out there really because it was profound and really moving and incredibly enjoyable to be in that stadium.
Very good. Well, tell you what will move me. Move me to be fully behind David Moyes' Red and White Army if United win at Newcastle and then in the Allianz Arena. What do you reckon, Paul? What are your predictions for the week's matches ahead?
I think Newcastle are worse than us. Newcastle season's been an absolute joke. I feel for their fans really because that club's run so abysmally by a headbutting maniac and a sort of profiteer. So I'm going to say we're going to beat them maybe 3-1. I said I'm full-time Devils and I've got a little bit of stick for this that I thought we'd just get humped in Barcelona. in Munich. I was being reasonably playful, I thought, about that. But, of course, if you ask me for a prediction of that result, I don't necessarily think it is written in the stars, and I think it would have to be for us to win. So my kind of rationalist prediction is a 2-0 defeat. There you go.
Very good. There's nothing rationalist about that, I would say. Being rationalist, being illogical, effectively. Look,
Yes. Not anti, I don't mean rationalist as in a person who doesn't like rationalism.
Yeah. No, strange route we're going down with this one. So I'm going to agree with you. I think United will lose 2-0. I think effectively it'll be decided by the first goal. And let's just make the assumption that Bayern will score that because they're going to have a lot of the ball and they're going to come out and try and do United early. I think it'll change the complexion of the game, and then you'll be trapped in a conundrum of playing pretty cautiously, which is the way United will almost certainly start and try and open it out. So there you go, 2-0 to Bayern, and I think we'll draw 1-1 at St James's Park.
Yeah, absolutely. That seems fair enough to me. All right, well, absolute pleasure talking to you about these things, Ed. And if you want to talk to either of us in the meantime, you can get me on Twitter at UTDRantcast. You can get Ed at United Rant. You can read what Ed writes on unitedrant.co.uk and read what I write on the Bleach Report if such a thing takes your fancy. If you want to help us out with bandwidth costs and equipment costs and stuff, then unitedrant.co.uk/donate is where you can do that. Thank you very much to everyone that's done that, and also a massive thank you to Simon Stevens, who very kindly included us in his he wrote a list of the things that he's sort of engaging with in culture, and it was easily the most highbrow list the Rantcast will ever be a part of. So thank you very much for that, Simon. It was much appreciated.
Very good. And if you want lowbrow, just check out my Twitter timeline. It's very good stuff. In the meantime, we'll leave you with this play-out track, and we'll see you next week.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.